50 FM 99.3 KNSI. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Taking You Home with VoigtJohnson Real Estate. Now, you can hear this program every Thursday morning at 7:23 and again Saturday afternoon at 12:53. Brandon Johnson, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are ya?
Well, who can argue? I mean, my gosh, we're almost ready to go ice fishing, right?
I know, winter is here.
Yikes. So, I just have to ask you, before we get any further, when the weather changes like it has, right? It's gotten colder. We have a nice warm-up this weekend. Does that affect you guys out there in the market of real estate?
Traditionally, between Thanksgiving and the New Year, the market does take a little bit of a breather. That's seasonally every year. There are still people moving to town. There's still activity out there, but it does slow down a little bit during the months of November and December.
Well, as your partner in real estate, Heidi Voigt always likes to say, life happens, right?
That is
right.
It
never slows down, that is for sure. Hey, let's look at some stats, and this is one of my favorite things to do, right? I always like to talk about inventory, do some comparison shopping, all that kind of stuff. What have you got for us today?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been talking to a handful of both buyers and sellers all right now in kind of that entry-level price point. And what I mean by entry-level, under $300,000. And so a lot of questions are, there's not a lot of, I would say, urgency on buyers' perspective. And so it's a good time, from a buyer's perspective, you know, things always heat up in the spring, or at least annually have. And I anticipate that there is a backlog of buyer demand, especially under that $300,000.
Okay.
And there's a lack of inventory right out there. But right now, there's kind of, in a lot of areas, just a lot of stalemates, lack of urgency from buyers' perspective. And I've had some encouraging talks like, you know, interest rates are going to be relatively stagnant, but it might be in your best interest to get serious here in the next month or two. You're going to have a huge advantage here in the month of December and January versus March and April.
Okay, now are you specifically talking about buyers or sellers here?
Specifically buyers, but
Okay.
I think there's advantages to sellers too. But from a buyer's perspective, you're going to be competing a lot more, especially in that price range under $300,000, than you are here in the next 30 to 45 days. And I don't see, I mean, interest rates could tick down a little bit, but I don't think anything substantial where it's going to pay to wait. And that being said, if they do come down, that's just going to drive prices up a little bit more too. So the conversations I've had is, hey, I know it seems like it's a tough time to move and no one likes moving when it's single digits, but it may be, if you find that right house, it's probably in your best interest rather than waiting 3 to 4 months.
Listen, I have moved in the summer. I have moved in the winter. It doesn't matter. Suck it up, Buttercup. Go out and buy that brand new house. It's out there ready and waiting for you. And you know what? After it's all said and done, you've taken care of all of your pals, right, that have helped you in the move.
Yep.
You can all sit back and enjoy a nice warm cup of coffee and look out the living room window and laugh at the snow.
That's correct. Just a couple of statistics I had here, got for the trailing week, so the last week of November, first week of December, showing activity, and this is in the central Minnesota area, of 199,000 and under. The showing activity is down 13% from last year, 2023, in that same 2-week stretch of end of November, early December. From 200,000 to 250,000, it's down almost 11%. And I don't feel, and this is just my gut feeling, there is any less buyer demand. The same amount of buyers are out there. There's just less supply. For whatever reason, there's less activity. But I think that's the opportunity if you're a buyer.
I would agree, because just like you said, you painted the picture perfectly. Later on, down the road, if those rates drop, you know what's going to happen.
Right. It's going to, because especially in that price point, people are buying a payment, and that pushes up the price.
You know, we've been talking about buyers, right?
Yep.
And I think one of the things that people really need to understand, if you are that potential buyer, you have the time now to get your act together, right? If you want to wait, I'm not suggesting that you do, but if they do, they have the time now to get their act together, get their financing in order, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what's interesting is when you go up to between 300 and 400,000, the showing activity is up almost 8%. And it's even more so from when you get up around $500,000 to 600, the showing activity is up 7 to 8%. So it's showing kind of a two-tier market where There's still active buyers in that move-up range.
Right.
But for whatever reason, buyers are taking a pause in that entry level, under 250, under 300,000, and that's the opportunity, in my opinion.
Do you think it's an inventory issue or not?
There's absolutely a shortage of inventory
In the starters.
in the 300,000.
Yeah.
We're putting a house on the market this week where we talked about a value, and we're discussing what to do just because there's literally no competition right now.
Okay.
So how can we take that? That's the opportunity from a seller's standpoint too. Is there's no competition, and there's still people that are on leases, that their leases are up all 12 months of the year and are looking to buy that first home, and they're less inclined to say, I want to move in April, May, and June just because their lease is up.
I'm so glad you brought up sellers, because if you're selling your house, you have to have a place to go, right? Yep. So that seller becomes the next buyer.
Absolutely, and that's the gridlock, and that's the value that we're trained specifically at VoigtJohnson on how to. It's not just a matter of getting your house sold, right, but it's a matter of procuring that next home and making the pieces fall into place. If you have to buy contingent, what are your options? So there's it's more than just finding a buyer for your home. It's making all the pieces fall into place. Because if you could sell your home and you have nowhere to go, what have you really accomplished, right?
Yeah, a lot of heartache. That's for a lot of hassle. Brandon, how do we work with you over at Voigt Johnson?
You can reach us online at VoigtJohnson.com or 320-774-2400.
Taking you home with Voigt Johnson Real Estate, Thursday morning, 7:23, Saturday afternoon, 12:53. And remember, start that home search at VoigtJohnson.com. Brandon, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.